When I was a kid, Cooking Mama was massively popular, and it's probably not too hard to see why. The game was easy enough for anyone of any age to pick up, and on the extremely successful Nintendo DS as well. So I guess it's also not too surprising that this success spawned several spin-offs. The first non-cooking themed Mama game was Gardening Mama.
Gardening Mama.
As you could likely guess from the title, this game is all about gardening. Instead of using cooking utensils to make tasty meals in the kitchen, you use gardening tools to cultivate plants in the garden, including a device used to plant bulbs that I'm sure no one with a dirty mind will think looks like something else. There are 4 different gardens themed around particular types of plants, and you scroll around the map to choose which ones you want to grow. As expected from a Mama game, you go through each step of the gardening process by playing a series of mini-games. However, after each step you'll need to wait a bit before you can continue. After all, gardening is largely about patience. In order to continue the growing process, you'll need to work on another plant. However, neglecting any of your plants for too long will cause them to begin to wilt, so it's best not to work on too many of them at once. And before you know it, you'll have some freshly harvested crops and newly bloomed blossoms.
What lovely flowers.
If you do a good job, you'll even have a visitor to your fully grown plants.
Look, a swallowtail butterfly.
The gameplay is what you'd probably expect. Simple, but not without a challenge. Actually, I thought this was one of the more challenging entries in the Mama saga. I found myself rarely receiving a perfect overall score by the time I had a fully grown plant. Then again, maybe I'm just not enough of a hardcore gamer to excel at Gardening Mama. The alerts about your plants wilting were a bit annoying, but it was only a minor inconvenience. All in all, it's a Cooking Mama game with a gardening coat of paint, so it's a solid game overall. Plus, I imagine that could be a fun way to introduce kids to how different types of plants are grown. Next up is Crafting Mama.
Crafting Mama.
In this game, Mama further demonstrates her homemaking mastery by guiding us in making various crafts. Again, this has a lot in common with the Cooking Mama games, just with crafting instead of cooking. But it also shakes things up a bit more than Gardening Mama does. Many of the crafts you make allow you to have more of a creative input, which makes sense given how arts and crafts go hand in hand. You can also adorn Mama in the various accessories you can craft, which is a nice touch. It's neat too that some crafts have a collection aspect to them, where making all the variations of certain crafts will be kind of like completing a picture puzzle. A lot of the crafts also have mini-games associated with them, which are fun little distractions that add to the amount of content you get in the game. Still, there were a few oddities that I couldn't help but point out. For one, I must question Mama's method of making candles. The very first step is to smash white candles with a mallet so that you can melt down the broken pieces. Except you really don't need to do that in real life. They sell ready-to-melt wax at craft stores. Yes, you can use old crayons to add color, but it's much cheaper to just buy the loose wax for the base instead of buying and destroying perfectly good whole candles. In fact, I'm surprised Mama doesn't have her own brand of meltable wax. Maybe she just likes to make extra work for herself, and spend more money than she needs to, I guess. For some crafts, you're required to rub glue onto something while making sure the wind doesn't blow debris onto your work. But you know what would save you a bunch of hassle? Gluing the parts indoors. I can promise you that unless you're stuffing it inside your nose, you will not die from inhaling the fumes from a glue stick. And even then, it won't be the fumes that kill you, but rather the suffocation from your own stupidity. Finally, I can't help but think that punching out a pre-made clock face and placing clock hands into it is stressing the definition of crafting just a little bit. Then again, Cooking Mama also included a quote-unquote recipe for instant ramen, so there's that, I guess. Am I being nitpicky as hell? Probably, but this is my video and I'll gripe if I want to. However, despite my nitpicks, this was actually the spin-off I enjoyed the most. Perhaps it's because I enjoy crafts in real life, and therefore it makes sense that I would enjoy a decently made game all about crafting. I guess you could also say I nag because I care. Funny enough, in contrast to Gardening Mama, this was probably the easiest of the Mama games, which might be because they want to have more focus on the creative angle. Admittedly, there are some mini-games that have been carried over from Cooking Mama, but I'm not holding them against it because I'm not that picky. So there's another point for Mama. But now, it's time to pack your bags with Camping Mama.
Camping Mama Outdoor Adventures.
Welcome to Camp Mama, where you'll travel around the world to sharpen your wilderness survival skills. You'll gather by the fire to participate in the time-honored activity of sandwiching flaming and sugar puffs between 2 graham crackers and a slab of chocolate. You'll also have to avoid various hazards in the wild, including the most ferocious of wilderness predators, bunny rabbits. This is where Camping Mama really changes the formula. The game is divided into several levels, where you'll control your character by walking around the map and completing various tasks with minigames. You also have a health bar you need to watch out for. And we actually get to hear Papa speak.
Fantastic! You're giving Papa a run for his money.
And he sounds absolutely ecstatic about that. This is probably the most unique out of the Mama games. It's honestly, I'm not a fan of it. I can appreciate that they tried to do something different, but I don't think that the adventure game elements meshed very well with the traditional Cooking Mama formula. It felt more like the adventure game aspects were interrupting the minigames we all expect from a Cooking Mama game, like they were working against each other instead of with each other. Not only that, but I didn't even think the minigames were all that fun. So sadly, this one doesn't quite measure up. Last of all, we have Babysitting Mama, because they sure as hell couldn't call it Baby Mama.
Babysitting Mama.
Although it would have been amusing if they had called it Mama Mama. When Babysitting Mama was first released, it came with a doll peripheral where you would insert your Wii remote into a sleeve in the back. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my hands on the doll. Luckily, I managed to improvise. I guess they figured that since this series stars a character with the word Mama in her name, it was only logical that they release a game about parenting. The way the controls work is that you use the nunchuck to navigate the game menus while the remote remains in the doll, or in this case, remains loosely attached to Pikachu. Minigames alternate between using the nunchuck and the remote with the doll. And remember,
No. Please don't shake the baby.
seriously, you are constantly reminded of this during the loading screens. Yes, shaking a baby in real life is something you should never, ever do, but good grief, I don't think even kids need that constant reminder, especially since the game will immediately stop if you so much as tilt the baby a centimeter too far. At least half the time when you're using the baby with the remote, Mama will scold you for shaking the baby, even if you know that you were following the directions exactly. I know that I don't exactly have the most ideal setup for this game, but I've heard many other reviews that had the same issues when using the official peripheral, so I'm pretty certain that this isn't just a me problem. I get that they were probably trying their hardest to not make this into a child abuse simulator, but still. And when the minigames do work, they are mind-numbingly dull. There are only so many variations of monotonous movements, nunchuck shaking, and button mashing I can tolerate before I feel like my brain's about to melt. Worst of all, though, are the sounds the baby makes, which is heard from the Wii Remote speaker. Just listen. Am I dead? Is this gamer hell? Even at the lowest volume setting, the baby's noises were completely grating on my eardrums, and I eventually muted the remote sound completely. Yes, babies crying in real life isn't the most pleasant sound in the world, but at least it doesn't sound like some static ear torture. And if that wasn't bad enough sound design, many times the music is so loud that you can barely hear what Mama is saying.
How about a big bump?
Unfortunately, the music volume is something that you can't control. And when you combine crappy controls, awful audio, and boring gameplay, you've got yourself a shit sandwich. I only played the bare minimum amount that I needed in order to get the footage for the video, which was less than an hour of gameplay. Even with that in mind, I'm starting to have some regrets about my life choices. And there's your taste of Cooking Mama spin-offs. While the first two weren't half bad, it sadly went downhill from there. With Babysitting Mama in particular, I can't help but imagine that was foreshadowing of the equally craptastic Hook Stars several years later. Still, I'm not ashamed at all to admit that I enjoyed the good Cooking Mama games and their spin-offs. Casual games like this don't have the best reputation, even beyond the DS, and I can understand why. Many of them are quickly and cheaply made, oftentimes to take advantage of a gimmick, and don't set out to accomplish much more than that. But for a while at least, Cooking Mama went beyond just being a gimmick, and actually put effort into its mechanics, sound, and graphics. While it's a shame that we haven't had a decent Cooking Mama game, or even a good Cooking Mama substitute in quite some time, the older entries have aged very well, and are still a lot of fun to go back to when you need a simple yet entertaining distraction. But seriously, Babysitting Mama just plain sucks. Thanks so much for watching! If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click like, and subscribe if you want to see more.